Airbnb's dropping some new policies and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. So Airbnb, every couple of months, they have a new summer release or winter release, fall release, whatever season it is. But they also drop new policies, and sometimes they're very open about it, sometimes they're not so open. So I wanted to go through those today so that you're clear on them and you can adjust your business, because some of these are a little challenging. Now, a lot of these are guest policies that favor or are meant to support guests and help guests more, but they do hurt the host. So I think it's important to know about these. Let's go ahead and dive into it. So policy number one that we're gonna cover is Airbnb does not want you sharing any links that are gonna take them off the platform. So examples of this could be like a guidebook that you use. I know us personally, we use Happy Guest, which is just kind of a welcome guide, and it also collects some guest info. Now, when you're a property manager like us, we are integrated through a PMS. There's kind of a workaround there with some of these policies. So luckily, they don't all necessarily apply to us, but if you're an individual host or you're a property manager that isn't on one of those PMS property management software systems, then this could be affecting you. And it's a really big bummer because there are some great guidebook options out there. Now, going forward, you'll most likely have to use Airbnb's guidebook, which isn't as great if you want to share your recommendations and instructions or anything else with guests in a unified area. You just can't use any exterior links. It's a bummer. I get it that, Airbnb wants to keep people in their platform, but there are some great services out there. The common theme with all these, I don't really like any of them, but I understand it from Airbnb's point of view. All right, the next policy is fee transparency. So Airbnb wants you to have all your fees clearly put out there, right? If there's any fees that they're gonna be charged, it needs to be in the checkout cart. So that could be fees like a security deposit, that needs to be in there. If you have a resort fee or any fee, there's a ton of fees out there. It all needs to be in that checkout cart. Now, if you have upsells like early check-in, late checkout, those sort of things, it needs to be listed in the description clearly, and it needs to simply say optional fee, right? If you're not actually charging them, it needs to show as an optional fee. Again, I don't necessarily love this because of the security deposit piece. If you want to charge the security deposit or offer the guest the ability to do a security deposit or a damage waiver or damage insurance, which is very, very popular, you can't really do that now. You kind of have to go one way or the other. And the bummer is, if you're charging a security deposit, it's really gonna inflate your price, even though the guest is likely gonna get that back if there's no issues, but that could make your listing less attractive because the price seems higher. Now, this next policy kind of relates to what we just talked about, no off-platform fee charges. So if you are gonna charge anything, even if it's an optional charge like early check-in, it needs to go through the Airbnb platform. There are some platforms or tools out there, technologies, where a guest, again, could go to a guidebook that you have and they could pay on their early check-in. You would process it on your end and they'd be all good to go. Now that all needs to go through Airbnb. So if you have those sort of fees, you need to charge it through Airbnb's system. They want a service fee off of it, which again, I don't love it, but the common theme with all this is that Airbnb wants to keep everything in their platform, in their ecosystem. They don't want to risk the chance of them going somewhere else and, being upsold something and not getting a piece of it. So everything now has to go through Airbnb's charging system. Now, this next one really sucks. You cannot collect a guest ID or any additional contact info. So as you know, when a guest books with you, you obviously can communicate with the guest through the Airbnb messaging system. You also get their phone number. Now, it's gotten harder to find the guest phone number. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but it's gotten harder to find that phone number, but you still have that as well. So Airbnb with this, again, they actually collect the ID from the guest, or at least they say they do. The problem here is that if you're a property management company like us, it's very important to our owners and our clients that they have security's top of mind. Now, again, we get around this because we're an integrated property manager, but for other folks out there that aren't, not being able to collect the ID to me is just really disappointing. I mean, if I'm hosting somebody in my home, I just want to have their ID at least on a temporary file so I know who's staying in my home. If there's a big issue and I need to get the police involved or something stolen, I need that ID, I need that identification. So this to me is weird. I don't like this because it just seems like Airbnb is trying to take on some of the liberties that property managers or hosts have, but they're not held to the same accountability, right? Because ultimately, if the guest, damages something or steals something, we have to go through Airbnb's program to get that reimbursed. But, as we've seen with Airbnb's air cover system, it's not super reliable. So by not being able to collect this information from guests, it's a little bit more difficult to hold them accountable if something bad goes wrong. So this next one is where it gets juicy. So chargebacks. Airbnb is now saying that if there's a chargeback chargeback initiated by the guest, host could have a delayed payout or no payout at all if the chargeback is successful from the guest point of view. Now, as you know, Airbnb is the merchant of record. For us on Vrbo, however, or a lot of other platforms, we're actually the merchant of record, which basically just means that you collect the money when the guest books or whatever your deposit period is. You're the one collecting the money, right? You're the one processing the cards. In Airbnb's case, they're kind of unique. They are the merchant of record. And this is really troubling because they're basically saying that they're going to represent us, but if they fail, we kind of fail. And it's scary because there are scammers out there, but if we go through all this work of hosting the guests, all the communication, the marketing, the cleaning, the inspections, the problem solving when guests come in and there's issues, we go through all of that process, Airbnb fails in fighting the chargeback, we're the ones that are ultimately losing out. Now, Airbnb is not going to get their service fee either, but it mostly impacts us, right? I understand why they're doing it. Airbnb is obviously losing money on chargebacks. They're a public company, so they're trying to make money. But this is very scary if you're a host, and I am not a fan of it at all. Now, the final policy, and maybe the one people heard the most about, is the cancellation policy. So Airbnb stresses it a lot. I know it comes up a lot when I'm in my one-on-one meetings with our Airbnb rep. They want us to have very flexible cancellation policies. They say, according to the data, guests really like that. I would tend to believe that. Just after COVID, we've seen guests really like the flexibility of either booking late or if they book, being able to get out of the reservation with a full refund close to arrival. So I do believe that is a trend, but it is, again, just a risky thing for hosts to offer super flexible cancellation policies. So they're tweaking their strict policy. They're taking it from 14 days out. There's I believe a full refund now. It's 7 days out. There's a full refund. There still are some stricter policies in place that you can use. That's what we'll be utilizing, but it's something to look at. I believe the change happens in early September. So I would go look at your cancellation policies before that time and just make sure you have the one that you want set up properly. So what do you think? All these policies I'm not the biggest fan of, but again, this is what happens when there's a public company. They're trying to make more money, keep their stakeholders happy. I think they're also trying to make the guest experience more consistent and standardized, kind of like the experience you have in hotels. I think that's one of the biggest complaints when it comes to short-term rentals and vacation rentals is the lack of consistency. And I get it, as you would expect. I want guests to have a consistent process, and if Airbnb thinks that's going to help that, then, you know, I understand that part of it, but it makes it more challenging for hosts. Now, there's a lot of hosts out there that say, you know, there's going to be a mass exodus from Airbnb. I've been hearing this stuff for years now. I don't think that's going to happen. I think, and I'm coming from the school of thought, is we just have to adapt, right? These things are going to happen. Of course, we can always fight back and share our opinions with Airbnb and local legislators to kind of help put different policies in place that maybe would restrict this. And we're kind of seeing some of this in South Carolina right now. But the biggest thing is we just got to adapt. So I hope this video kind of brought some of those new policies to light. Maybe you knew about all of them, maybe you didn't hear about most of them, but I just want there to be transparency and you be prepared so that you can adapt and adjust your business how you need to be successful when these new policies are officially in place. So hope you liked the video. Please subscribe, comment if there's anything you want me to make a video on in the future. I'd be happy to do it. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys and have a good one. See ya.